Welcome to Have You Heard, where we talk about issues at the intersection of agriculture and engineering. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Morgan Hayes and Josh Jackson.
Welcome. This is the Have You Heard podcast. This is episode 56. This is an episode specifically about cool season annuals. I'm Morgan Hayes, an assistant professor in Biosystems and Ag Engineering here at the University of Kentucky, focusing on livestock facilities. And in my personal life, I farm in Boyle County, Kentucky, with my husband, commercial cattle and hay.
I'm Josh Jackson, assistant professor in Biosystems and Agriculture and Engineering as well. I focus on precision livestock farming. In my personal life, I also raise registered Angus beef cattle, and we actually have a couple of goats now.
Okay, Josh. So our topic today is cool season annuals, but before we get to them, let's talk a little bit about what's been happening on the farm.
Oh, bunch of crap. We actually spread a lot of manure.
A lot of manure.
So we went through on the two farms wherever we had a hay feeding pad. One farm we have a hay feeding pad, other one we have a dedicated hay feeding area. We scraped it off once this winter, but we had another time we had to scrape it off this weekend. So we spent pretty much the whole weekend just spreading manure.
Have you moved your cows yet? I know that was one of your things that you were thinking about doing.
It's sad but true. It's on the to-do list.
Yeah, things sometimes stay there for a while. It's unbelievable how long something can stay on a to-do list. It can stay on for over a year if you're really lucky and you have a tractor down.
So yeah, we have a tractor down. I had to take my truck to the shop actually this weekend as well. So another vehicle trying to get repaired. I don't know what happened with it. The ABS light came on. Some other bells and whistles started going off. So
well, braking system's important. So I think that's a good decision to get that
secured.
Pretty much
braking system, like the ABS light and engine light came on. So I was like, whatever it is, it could be. Hopefully it's a sensor error, but I'll take it to the shop anyway.
Good decision. Safety first.
So other than that, we pretty much just literally spread manure as much as we could, as fast as we could, and then moved some stuff around and actually took a little bit, put on my garden. Help. A little late, but I was like, it
may help.
It may help. So I need some organic matter in there.
Yeah, we spread about 2 weeks ago most of our manure. We still have one large pile to deal with, but typically we spread that one in the fall because some of the land that we use is hay fields. And just to not have a lot of dead organic matter that we're going to pick up when we cut, we'll typically spread that farm later in fall. So it has time to really break down before we start cutting again.
And we spread a lot to our pastures.
Yes.
We were spreading a lot to our pastures. And we did the soil sample. They needed some love. We didn't do any manure sampling, but we were spreading it because we still saw some brome sage out there. No, it needed some love in those pastures.
Sure.
More than some.
Probably always needs love. That's a challenge, is that around here we tend to have pH issues that sort of, even if you're doing everything right, they just tend to crop up every year or two. No pun intended there. It just is what it is. It is a challenge. So just you're constantly fighting to get enough soil samples, enough manure analyses, what's happening on. But it is part of life at this point, just managing all of that. So on our farm, we're still waiting on one cow to calve. I told you last time we recorded that we had one come the day that we were moving them to the back. And actually, they're on the back right now. They're been on there almost a week now, and they're going to rotate from the first half to the second half today. And that actually is a field that has a bunch of wheat in it. So it's going to tie in perfectly to our topic for today, our cool season annuals, our experiences with them. But they're doing really good in the back. Aside from that, we're just working through, we processed some beef and got that back, figuring out how we're going to sell, what our prices look like. The prices right now are really difficult. The market won't hold prices super high, but the reality is I could sell a live animal right now at 800 pounds for a lot of money. Trying to figure out how much I have to make above and beyond that to justify putting the feed in the animal with feed costs where they're at is tricky, because the market doesn't seem to be matching what I think the costs are.
Yes.
Right now. And now that could be that we're going to see some jumps in prices here in the fall. So for anyone that doesn't have cattle and isn't engaged with the cattle market, This might be your chance to buy a quarter of a beef before they jump up in price. I really do think that even at the supermarket, I can't see how prices aren't going up pretty significantly late 2023, early 2024.
Yes.
And there's been lots of other dynamics here in the state with cattle pricing. I don't want to get into all the exciting details. But there's been some news stories about it, so if you're interested, you can go look them up.
I know Kenny Burdon, we asked him this many a times. It's like, why isn't the price of beef higher at the store? Why don't we get more? And he's just like, it doesn't. It's what we can get. It's a luxury item for people, and so it's like what we get is what we get. Doesn't necessarily mean what it takes to produce it.
Yeah, well, I will say though that the big three, the big processors are not going to lose money, and where cattle prices are at right now, where futures are projected this fall, there's no way that they're going to sell beef for the same price that they're selling it right now at the supermarket in 2024.
Yeah,
they're just buying animals at a high enough price that it's probably going to carry over onto the price of the meat that you're going to pay at the store, which is good for us as farmers. It would help if our inputs hadn't also gone up at the same rate. But at least the cattle price has gone up enough to help us make some decisions and allow us to cull some cows and also allow us to maybe hold some calves and have extra money. So we're still figuring all that out. We weighed calves last week, trying to get a handle on size of animals, how much weight we want them to gain, where we think the market's going to be, and decide when we want to sell our weaned calves. But for right now, we have them.
Okay.
And we're still selling hay. We just sold another couple loads in the last week. Yep. I mean, it's a limited market at this time of year, but we sold another chunk of hay.
Yes, some people, you still need to essentially go on impulse power just to get you through maybe a couple more days.
Yeah, I mean, people that are feeding year round. So, we're typically a pastured state. So almost everyone has cattle out on grass, and grass has been growing. But some people put animals out early this year because it grew early and then it got cold again.
Yep.
And it slowed. Like we just talked about the pricing. There are a lot of people backgrounding right now, aggressively backgrounding. And if the grass didn't hold up under that early graze, they have animals and they have to feed them. Their budget doesn't allow them to sell them again right now. The market is not good enough that they've gained money in the last 4 weeks, enough money to justify selling and rebuying again. So there are people that just have to feed hay, and they maybe didn't anticipate that little slowdown, that little hiccup in the growing season. Now, they shouldn't have anticipated early April as growing season, but to be fair, it looked like a growing season. It was warm enough. The soil was warm enough. The grass was growing.
It was perking up pretty good there initially.
In late March and early April. And then we just had a little bit of a slowdown, and now it's going again. But we sold some hay in the last couple of weeks to people that maybe were overzealous in stocking, or people that are keeping animals on hay year round for other reasons.
Okay.
So interesting, just random fact for you there. So let's go on to our topic though for today, which is season annuals, because this is a perfect time of year to utilize a.
Yep. And so we've actually used ryegrass. So you talked about using wheat. We've used ryegrass in the past. Actually had a rotation where we had some on a different farm. We were renting at that point, so we're utilizing soybeans, and then we come behind it really low on hay, planting some ryegrass, get some good cover on that ground, but also getting really good hay yield.
We've also used ryegrass in the past as well, and I happen to love an annual ryegrass.
Yep.
Not a cereal rye, but a ryegrass specifically, although both cereal rye and ryegrass are both a viable option. And currently we have wheat, and we have wheat there because it was a risk management strategy. Wheat is significantly cheaper than ryegrass as a seed, and we were able to get some that was maybe not in the best condition, but was nothing I would have wanted to use as a cereal grain type of, just something to be used as a cover.
Okay.
A weed management strategy, but a grazable one. And so that's what we have our cattle on right now. And I just want to know what made you decide to use the ryegrass, and then what did you think the benefits were? Yeah.
So part of it, so we were using that, coming after ryegrass after soybeans. We were just looking for that additional yield. So we were looking for something to hold that ground, and we didn't do it every year. It was just, years which we anticipated we're going to need some extra hay this spring. We're kind of feeling the pinch. If we're low on hay supplies, like we need a plan B. And so that was like ryegrass. Usually we're trying to have that as a plan B or another option. And we have used it very successfully in a couple of our heavy use areas. Pastures, we actually put it in relatively late, but it actually came on fairly strong.
Yeah, it to me, some of these cool season annuals, one of their best strengths is that they can be a weed management strategy. They come on earlier than, say, like the clovers, and potentially even a little bit harder earlier than the fescues. So if you have areas that have been like overrun or overused, this is a way to keep weed pressure down until some of those other perennial crops really start to thrive. And so that's one of the benefits. To me, the other benefit, and I've noticed this with my cattle specifically, is that they shed better. Where fescue tends, because of some of the vasoconstrictions, they don't tend to shed off winter coats as well. They tend to look fuzzy in the spring. Really, it's kind of difficult. And I have fuzzier animals than some. I fully acknowledge that I have some breeds that have heavier hair coat. Which is great through the winter, but it's a challenge when we come into the summer season if they don't shed well. And every time I've put them onto a ryegrass or a heavy wheat field, they shed much better.
Makes sense.
And so for me, that's a real benefit, especially when I have cows that are in lactation that are on my spring calving group, getting them onto something, getting them shed out really nice and clean and light. So they're not going to have so many heat stress events in another month here. Hopefully another month. Hopefully we don't have heat stress before that. It'd be pretty early for us to have major heat stress events. We're getting into June. So that's the other big benefit. And it kind of gets you through this like sort of funky season where the some of the fescue is coming on, but it's just water. There's no real nutrition in there. Some of these wheats and ryegrasses, because they come on a little bit earlier, seem to be a little bit better for those animals in lactation right now. Hold weight a little bit better on them.
We think we get pretty good gains off. Like put the calves out there as well. Put decent gains on them. Decent gains for these animals on those ryegrass pastures.
Nutritionally, it's if you look at it as a nutrition source, ryegrass is excellent. I mean, the challenge is you have to plant an animal every year, right? So there's logistics involved in it, but certainly there are benefits to have a small number of acres.
And the other benefit for us is because we usually use it in heavy use areas. So we put it in heavy use, or one that had been heavy use in maybe the past year, kind of rotate between. And so get that in there, get that with some heavy, dirty fescue. So the ryegrass takes off initially, then the fescue is hopefully coming on behind. Most of the time, we hope that coming on behind it gives it a chance to kind of get a foothold.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. There are a lot of options out there, but I would say that probably ryegrass and the wheat are probably the most common season that I see people utilize. When I lived out in some of the western states, you saw a lot more grazing. Winter grazing, rye, and specifically on fields. Very common, even in their commercial grain fields, they would do early grazes in the wintertime just because there's such a nice nutritional balance on there. And they knew that the plants were going to pop back up with new leaves before they were ready to actually a better term. Out.
And I know, I was just at the wheat field day they had in Princeton. And so they were talking about, they had a couple different varieties down there. They had the variety plots. And one of the plots they had was low input, seeing how well they do in low input. A lot of farmers are, I think, thinking about it. And they were showing down there, if you have low input, how well does it do? Because I think not looking necessarily for grain levels of production. We're just looking for growth.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. To me, it's almost like talk about green fertilizers or green manures. And sometimes these covered crops, these cool season annuals they can act as that as well. So they're a good way to, if you're going to use a lot of nutrients in the fall, do applications in the fall. This year, because of costs and things, it wasn't really an incentive apply fertilizers in the fall over the spring months. But in a lot of years, people will do a fall application just because they know supply, demand, and cost wise, they can factor something like that in the fall. And putting a cover on there to utilize those nutrients so that they don't wash off of the field is also a benefit. And for manure applicators that are applying manure, that's also a way to hold the nutrients from manure, which tends to be a surface application.
Yeah, and you know, we actually had it as well, so we put some in. Mom had a much bigger, probably about quarter-acre garden there, so we actually put a lot of that ryegrass in there to help break up the ground and help get some good root depth penetration, organic matter down there as well. So we thought we saw some benefits from that as well.
I have a neighbor that has a mix that he calls cow chow. It's a winter mix, but it includes not only some of those grasses, but it also includes radishes, the daikon radishes, things like that are also designed to break up the frangipane or the hard layers and really round, soft, and aerate that soil a little bit. Those tend to die with some of those heavy frosts, cold snaps in the middle of winter. But if they get put in early enough, they create a lot of air pockets in there. And then because they break down so early, they're actually make those nutrients more available in spring as well, which is kind of an interesting mixture. Yeah. Certainly the animals enjoy eating a variety of things, so that's a little bit more challenging if you don't have a local store that sells a mix, but certainly an option if you have a mix and a planter a seed drill that'll accommodate it. Yeah, it's really an interesting option.
Yeah, we've gone to a couple farms where they've used the turnips and it worked for them.
Yeah, I think there's some benefits. I think if you actually look at the literature from a breaking up of soil, actually some of the ryes are more aggressive at breaking through those layers. It's just a much smaller root structure, so it doesn't make as big an opening.
Right.
If you have really hard frangipane layers, really hard layers that are hard to break up with root structures, some of those ryegrasses are excellent at it.
Excellent.
They're also harder to kill. That's where people complain about them. But
so we had that ryegrass in Mom's garden, and so we bush hogged it off, and then cut it off. Had the calves go in there, graze it, bush hogged it off, tilled it, and thought, okay, we're good to go. Then somehow it's coming back. It came back.
Yeah, and ryegrass is notorious for being one that's very difficult to kill, even with a spray. Not for your garden, probably. You probably don't want to throw any aggressive Roundups down, but even things like Roundup that are traditionally used for a lot of grass killing really struggle to get a very good kill on a ryegrass. It's a very robust regrower. So I think that's a pretty good summary, though, of cool seasons, at least our experiences with them. I personally don't have any cool seasons that I try and kill off. I let them keep grazing them until they disappear, and they tend to disappear pretty quickly once we hit June because it gets too hot.
Yep.
And I'll take them as long as they'll grow at this point. Something else for my animals.
Yeah, we're kind of the same boat. Like, it's got that biomass coming up. We let them hit it, then pull them off, fertilize, let them hit it again. And that should be it by that point.
Absolutely.
Okay. It'll sunset.
Yeah. Okay, so let's find out what's happening on the farm next week, and then...
So we're going to try to... So our goal is to still try to move those cows, but also go ahead and we're going to do preg testing. Go ahead and do that, because we've been kind of kicking the ball on that one. Then also still repairing some equipment. And we have a couple fields we need to just fence off, and still doing some fence repair from all the wind.
Okay. We still have some fence repair to do as well. Similarly, we actually bought new rubber for the gathering wheels on the baler. Not something that's necessary to make the baler run, but something to make the baler run more effectively. Yep. We had a couple pieces that were broken off, and we've just been kind of limping them, but we made the commitment to replace them. So that's coming in this week so that we can hopefully get them on before we get into the hayfield. Although at this point, it doesn't look like we're going in the hayfield for a few weeks anyway. So we would like to, but we're not probably. But that is on our agenda when the window opens.
Okay, so maybe Memorial Day, fingers crossed, potentially.
Hey,
or after.
It could be before. If it comes before, we'll take it. But I'm not holding my breath that we're going to get in before Memorial Day at this point. It looks like the next 2 weeks are pretty wet and not warm enough to. Any windows that are open are not long enough and warm enough to make me comfortable.
Not worth the gamble at that point.
Not yet. So those are still on the agenda. Those types of things, and hopefully we eventually get this last calf out of this cow. So
all right, fingers crossed.
Yep, fingers crossed. With that, I guess we will end our podcast for today, and we will see you guys next week with another podcast.
All right, take care.
Have You Heard is a production of the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, along with the Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering. Discover what's wildly possible at ca.uky.edu.